Welcome to My Money Mindset podcast, where we explore how a healthy mindset is the foundation for financial success. Each week, we delve into mindset hacks and practical strategies to help you enhance your income, help you make more appropriate investments for yourself, and to improve your overall financial well-being. Join us on this journey to transform your financial future by transforming your mindset. Please note that the information provided on this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute as personal, financial or health advice. It has been prepared without considering your individual objectives, financial situation or life needs. Before making any financial or health decisions, you should consult with a qualified professional or financial advisor to ensure the information aligns with your specific circumstances. So let's begin and enjoy this journey as each episode teaches us on how to improve our overall mindset that overall improves our financial success. Hey everyone, in today's episode I wanted to speak about buying property with friends to obviously be able to utilize a lower deposit or buying a better property, so making your sort of dollar go a little bit further. What quite happens is the trend is obviously with properties going up in price, a lot of mates get together and friends get together and say, well, I'll put my 50,000 with your 30,000 or my 50 with your 50 and put the deposit together and purchase something a lot more substantial than sort of what would they'd only be able to afford on their own. So it can work quite well. There's quite a few ways of doing it. Most of the time they can just do like a tenants in common or a joint ownership, so you just buy it together. Obviously when you register the property purchase under your name or names, it gets into the State Revenue Office. All the legal stuff is done in accordance with solicitors and so on and so forth. How do the banks look at it? Well, pretty much the banks look at it as you're buying it together. You'd have to stipulate what's going to be, how it's going to be structured, so who owns more of the percentage of the property, or is it 50-50, that sort of stuff, and go through those numbers together. So buying a property with friends to lower the deposit, so to speak, and what you need to save and share the ownership costs can really take advantage of buying a better property. So if you only do have 50,000 or 30,000 and your partner or friends or mates have got an additional 30 plus 30 or that, it means that you're buying a better property, so to speak, or you're buying the same property with a lot larger deposit to minimize your amount of borrowing, which is good, especially with the high price markets, right? But like anything, like these strategies, you got to make sure you plan it really carefully and you put up all your legal safeguards to avoid future disputes, all the problems and ramifications that can happen under joint ownership or tenants in common or anything like that. So in this episode, I'll just discuss why it is good. I mean, obviously it's lower upfront costs, so sharing a deposit, you're sharing the legal fees and taxes, a lot less too. Shared mortgage responsibility. I suppose in that sense, you're going to be able to qualify for a better property together, and the shared ongoing costs, which would be maintenance, insurance, council rates, all that sort of stuff, right? So anything that comes as far as costs. Now, that being said, the costs are shared, but also so is the profit. So it swings and roundabouts. Something to be aware of, but it gets you into the property game. Sort of what I would have a look at as far as your risks or just being considerate for the following would be probably different financial situations. So one friend may not be able to keep up with the repayments, right? So obviously if you're making your repayments and your friend is unable to keep up with that, you've got to make sure that you guys pressure test yourself and you both, as in your partner or your friend that you're going to buy the property with, have sort of had a look at that. Disagreements or life events such as, your friend getting married or moving out or changing career or anything like that, that can sort of sometimes complicate the ownership. So make sure, if your relationship changes, that's going to be not detrimental to actually what you're doing with this property, right? Credit implications. So what that sort of means is if one of you has a default or will default, sort of most of the time that can impact the entire party type of thing. So you really want to make sure that, once again, who you're partnering up with to buy a property, sort of you pressure test that relationship and make sure that both or all of you are on board with this and understand the implications, and also have an exit strategy. And what I mean by that is to make sure that if someone wants to sell, what's the preference there? Sometimes we have to draw up joint ventures, as in, or agreements in place in addition to the contracts and everything like that, to say, well, look, if let's say there's two of you or three of you that own this property and one of you want to sell it, well, the other two or the other partner has the first right of refusal to buy that portion of the property. Or you might have a JV or a joint venture to state, or an agreement to state, if someone does want to sell and the other one can't afford it, well, you've got to sell the property. So you've got to look at all the variables in if the event that someone wants to sell, and don't think that, this doesn't happen. This actually happens quite a bit. I've noticed a lot with some clients that when they joint ownership, 2 years, 5 years down the track, one of the owners wants to sell because they meet someone, or they want to buy another property, or they think it's slowing them down, or whatever, or they just need the money up front and they want to sell. It can cause a lot of drama. And if you don't put these legal sort of gateways in place to make sure that if or when this problem does occur, or issue does occur, that you've covered it legally, right? So key steps with this, especially with joint tenants or tenants in common. So I'll just run that. I did an episode in relation to this, but I'll just briefly explain that with joint tenants, it's sort of equal ownership, so it's shares of the property. So if you think if there's two people, it's equal ownership of the share of that property. So that's joint tenants. And it's automatic inheritance if someone was to pass away, right? So that's joint tenants. Tenants in common is where you unequal shares. So for instance, someone puts in more of a deposit. Let's say they put in 70% of the deposit and the other only 30%. This is probably where you'd want to implement tenants in common as opposed to joint ownership. And it's plausible to the inheritance, right? So obviously that's where you want to have a look at and make sure that you have in place. So these are all the what to look out for, right? So joint tenants and tenants in common, number one. The other thing is called the co-ownership agreement, which it's a crucial thing, because it stipulates the contribution, so the deposit, the maintenance, who does this, who does that, who pays rates, unequal shares, whatever. That's all placed in the agreement. So very, very crucial co-ownership agreements. What happens if someone wants out? So if they do want to sell, like we were just saying, dispute resolution methods. Say, for instance, if you can't come to an agreement, if an issue or something, you want to make sure that you have a dispute resolution method or methodology stipulated in the agreement. And also exit and resale strategies. Make sure that's in the co-ownership agreement. Co-ownership agreements are very crucial simply because they stipulate anything, if anything was to go wrong, that you've got it all covered, and everyone is in agreement there and then when you're buying the property. Very, very important. Mortgage considerations. So namely, all parties are jointly liable, right? So I mean that's a given, because you're basically both owning, or you're all owning the property, and you definitely want to be sort of all of you liable and have that motivation or understanding that all of you guys are sort of responsible for this. Yeah? An asset does require maintenance. It requires bills to be paid. Hopefully it's growing in value, and this is why you're doing it. It's an investment, right? So and most of the time, don't forget that if you are getting a loan for this property, that most of the banks or lenders require all you parties to be on the loan. It's not like you're saying, well, I'm going to step off the loan and someone's going to take full responsibility of it, right? That's why they do credit checks, and when everyone's involved and everyone has to be on the loan, credit checks will be done. So that's another thing to be aware of. And the last key step, I think, would be the most likely legal and financial advice. I'd always sort of seal the whole entirety of this strategy of buying with a friend or friends to make sure that legal and financial advice, can't stipulate this enough, has been really resourced. Use a solicitor to obviously draw up all the agreements. Just don't write it on the back of an A4 paper or on a Word document and say, there you go. Make sure you use reputable solicitors to draw up the agreement. And all of you have to get independent legal and tax advice, right? So don't think that you're all going to go to the accountant or the same solicitor or so. It's probably better, and most of the time a requirement from a lender or a bank or investor, that you independently get separate legal advice and tax advice. That is one thing that a lot of people get caught out. They use the one accountant or the one solicitor and they all go there, and sometimes the lender goes, no, sorry, we really need you to sign off on this loan. We need you to be separate, independent legal advice and tax advice. So just make sure you understand that. And the last thing is to consider whether the property ownership affects eligibility for grants or benefits. So talking to financial brokers and accountants to just make sure that if one of you is eligible for a grant or a benefit in buying the property, make sure that all of you sort of, if you are buying it together, that is it affected, or those grants or benefits that you're going to get, one applicant's going to receive, but the other applicant may affect that because they're buying the property together, if that makes sense, right? So all in all, there are a lot of key advantages, but there's also a lot of risk and considerations to take in. Does it mean that you should or you shouldn't? I think for like anyone considering buying a property with someone else, really just like anything in a relationship, make sure that you guys are on board and assimilate the same sort of interests and considerations and understandings, and there's the implications that are really associated with buying something together. And I would always make sure that you definitely want to seal these mortgage considerations, set it up as a co-ownership agreement, make sure that's in place and that the legal and financial advice has been taken on board and ticked off as a crucial part of this process. So I hope it helps. Once again, is it the way to go forward? Sometimes if you think that you want to ask a few more questions, please hit me up on it. Happy to help in this regard. It is just another strategy out there for people that are trying to get onto the property band, like as in getting to property. It may even mean that you already own a lot of other property and you want to, buy co-ownership with someone and start developing together in a company, right? So it doesn't necessarily just mean, well, you're doing it just because you can't afford it. It can sometimes mean that you're doing a development. So you may have your own property that you're living in and you want to buy an investment together with a friend of yours to develop it and make money on and then flip it or keep it or rent it out. And, it's all relative. So what we stipulated in this episode, it's all relative. It all binds under the same sort of considerations. You've got to make sure that you set this property up as in joint tenants or tenants in common. You need to have your co-ownership agreement that's put in place. You need to have your considerations for the mortgages, so speak to your financial broker or accountant or advisor, and make sure that you got financial legal advice. That it goes in without saying for even if you are doing a development or anything like that. So hope this helps, guys. Hit me up if you need me to explain anything else in detail, and see you on the next episode.